Right, what's up, people? However many of those of you that are left. Figured I'd take a departure. Oh no, this ain't gonna be a comedy video. Every one of my videos is a comedy video, hence a departure would be me doing something serious. Right? I don't know. Yeah, I figured I'd go with reggae today. Shaggy. I don't give a fuck what anybody says. His best song, It Wasn't Me. It Wasn't Me by Shaggy. That's what it's all about right there. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do in this video. And this was just something that I was ruminating on. Is I'm going to give a Buddhist exegesis of Genesis chapter 1, or at least the relevant parts thereof. So, I don't know. Just bear with me here. In the beginning. Now, when we hear the words in the beginning, what do we... ordinarily, what creeps into our mind right away is time. The notion of time. In the beginning means at the first instant of time. Here's what I want you to do. Forget about that. That's not what it means. I want you to think about time for a second and how it is what we might call prioritized. So, for example, and actually the word prioritize has a temporal word built into it, prior. So that which is prior determines that which is posterior or later or after. This is a relationship of dependency that we interpret a certain way, but let's try not to do that here. Let's try to take that same relationship of dependency and make it atemporal. So we still have that same dependency of relation causally, but let's make it atemporal. What happens when we do that? Well, then everything becomes eternal, which gets back to the Buddhist teaching. There is no real beginning. There are many beginnings. As a matter of fact, okay, every single instant of sentience or consciousness is what is called unborn or bornless or spontaneous. So, like, for example, we can say that the number 3 is prior to the number 4. In a sequence of counting, we can say that. However, both the number 3 and the number 4 are eternal. Neither one precedes the other. It's only within an understanding of ordering something within a framework or within what's called samsara that we get these particularities. So, to get back. In the beginning, God. Now, deconstruct that all you want. I've done it. I've done it in probably about half of my videos. I've had to come to kind of lay that out there because this is one of those words that I think is crazy in the sense that it really needs a different word because of all the negative and foolish connotations of that term. But at the same time, you really can't replace it with anything. What are you going to... Everything you replace it with doesn't seem to have that same hook. That same emotional hook that you need. So, we'll leave it at that. You already know my analysis. The ultimate God would be the zero. Or Dharmakaya. That which gives rise to everything. While being all of it, it is none of it. To go back a few videos, completely boring. God is completely boring, yet completely necessary. Go fucking figure. Right? In the beginning, God created. Bara, created. Now, we'll get back to that, exactly what that means in a second when we get further down. The heavens and the earth. Now, I'm also going to get back to heavens, Shamayim, which in the Hebrew has this weird way they do things. It's not like our language. In our language, there is a singular and a plural. You either have one or you have more than one. In Hebrew, there's three choices. You can have one, you can have two, that's called the dual form, or you can have more than that, which would be our plural. Shamayim, the heavens, is a dual noun. Now, what does that mean? So if we... Okay, let's go back and retranslate it. In the beginning, God created the two heavens and the earth. Why two heavens? What does that mean? Well, I could either do it now or I could do it after I go into the earth, but why not do it now? It is the interior and the exterior. This is the ultimate, okay, for example, okay, so when we get into, okay, fuck it. I'm going to put it off. We're going to go to earth next. We'll get back to heavens, trust me. God created the heavens and the earth. And the earth was tohu and bohu. Formless and void. It didn't say the heavens were, the two heavens. It said the earth, samsara, was formless and void. Now, these are, and there have been many, and you can go into the whole tohu, and you get to Tiamat and bohu, and you get to Behemoth. And you can do a lot of mythic things. And this is what is so beautiful about mythologies, even the Hebrew mythologies. Which is why I'm, not so quick to dismiss these stories. They're good stories. They survived the test of time, for fucking crying out loud. And I love me some comic books. As long as you don't get your shit confused and think it's something more than a goddamn comic book, you're good. And the earth was without form and void. And those two things imply a dualism. So you can think of, for example, think of a mold. Like a Jell-O mold. Like you wanted to make Jell-O Christmas trees. So you have two things that are required. You need the heated gelatin. And you need the mold within which to pour it. Tohu and bohu, formless and void, represent these two things. Which is why you see, and I'm not going to go much further with the whole this day and this day and this day and this day, because number one, it is of course the whole cosmology of it is fucked up, and number two is that you really can kind of get it all without having to go into the details of it. But so like on day 3 and day 4 and day 5, you have this sequence of first eliminating tohu and then eliminating bohu. First you create the space within which something is created, and then you create the creation by that mold that you have eliminated the formlessness. So first you grant the form, and then it's kind of like you, and again, this mirrors Aristotle, where he's talking about form versus matter, and, you know, his analogy was, you know, clay and the sculpture. And it's very similar. It's the same fucking concept. You either get it or you don't. So, in the beginning, God, for lack of a better term, created... Okay, wait a minute. Let's step back for a second. There were two authors of the creation stories in Genesis. The first author, which is referred to as E, and the reason it's referred to as E is because he uses for his designation of God, he uses the term Elohim, which technically means multitude of gods, or gods. It's not a dual. It's a plural. Implies a multitude. Now you get your, you know, your scholars and your Christian apologists that'll say, well, this is the plural of majesty. It's really just one God, but because he's so awesome, they had to use the plural when they were talking about him. You even get this in fucking human speech, where you'll get a president of the United States or somebody that stands up before some large audience and says some shit like, we deem it necessary. But it's just one guy talking, right? That's the plural of majesty. I almost don't think it matters what the intentions of the author of Genesis were. Because again, divinity, according to at least this entire exegesis, Buddhist, by the way, sort of. I do everything sort of. Everything for me is sort of. Because why buy into any particular brand? I think if you do that, then you're kind of like a sheep. You need to have everything at your disposal in order to really understand what's... And at the end of the day, really, all any of us are doing is making an educated guess. The only facticity is facticity. Yeah, I'm going all in. Almost like Berkeley style. I am at the fundament an idealist when it comes to my metaphysics. No doubt. But see, the thing is, idealism and hard empiricism, actually, it's one of those things where it's kind of like, what do they call it, the horseshoe diagram? Where you go so far from one extreme to the other that you're actually closer than any other 2 points. Exactly. So, okay, you thought I forgot about the dual heavens. What this represents, first of all, it represents something separate from the tohu and bohu that characterize what is called the earth. I believe it's eretz, but I could be wrong about my recollection of the Hebrew. You can see I don't have a fucking Hebrew Bible. This is all from fucking memory. Actually, I had a Hebrew Old Testament, and I threw it away when we moved. Because it was decrepit. It was something that I got at some kind of a book sale. And first of all, it was just pure Hebrew. It wasn't parallel text, anything. And it had no notes of any sort. And the thing was basically falling apart. This was a really old book. But it was the Old Testament in Hebrew. But what have you. So, if my memory serves me correctly, it's Eretz was the earth. But whatever. The earth was characterized by this formlessness and void, but not the two heavens. The two heavens were left alone after that. As a matter of fact... Don't make me pull out my Strongs. I still have my Strongs, god damn it. You can't have a Bible if you don't have a Strongs. It's right there, I can see it. It's the poop colored book. Oh. This is the Strongs. Now this is a motherfucker of a book. And I mean a motherfucker of a book. It's heavy as fuck. I almost broke my arm pulling it off the shelf. You can see mine is kind of worn a little bit. Age, use, what the fuck have you. And this is no joke. See, now we have the internet and phones and... Hey, Google, how many times is... Exactly. So we don't need a Strongs anymore, but I don't give a fuck what you say, I'm keeping mine. So we can go through, and what we do is, fuck it. Am I actually going to do this in this fucking video? While I'm actually trying to talk about, wow, we're not that far away. Again, not that far away. Yeah, we're moving in the right direction. No. Close. There we go. Heaven. Okay, so you see, what happens here is, okay, this is heaven. In the beginning, God created the heaven. Okay, and all this, and see, that number there, that 8064, that's important. That's the Hebrew word. So if we go back to there's a part back here where you see how it differentiates. We go back there and we look up 8064, and we're gonna get a word. But we can see this is always the same word. Now, we can understand that what they were thinking of when they wrote it was that they were talking about basically where the rain comes from. Right? That's what they meant. The firmament. They believed in a domed, flat earth, whatever. That's what they thought. Problem is, I don't care what they thought. This is an exegesis. This is me telling you the deeper meaning. Because I know better than God himself. Because after all, God is the undifferentiated zero. He's incapable of knowing anything. Omnipotent? No. Not at all. There's a difference between having all power, which is always considered in the active sense, versus having all potential, which would be considered in the passive sense. I'll grant the latter to God, but not the former. So what do the two heavens represent? The inner and the outer. Of what? Sentience. This is why everything that happens after that point concerns only the physical. Because, okay, you have these two philosophical analyses of the world of phenomena that are at odds with each other. One is called materialism. Some people even go so far as to say it's realism, although I think they've kind of co-opted. Don't get me started on that. We'll give them that, whatever. And this dominates the thinking process of the West. Then you have another contrasted with that, which is known as idealism, which is where you start getting into the extreme empiricism of, say, a David Hume or a Charles. It was Berkeley, but it wasn't Charles. What the fuck was he? He was a bishop or some shit. He was at least a priest. He was a religious man. And when you go back and you read a lot of these fathers of the church and shit like that, and you'll see when they start and they get into the Plato, it's Plato versus Aristotle, okay? Which is prior? The material or what we do? Mentation. It's a real word. Look it up. Mentation. Thinking. Perceiving. Observing. Being conscious. Now see, this is idealism. If I was to say that that is prior, metaphysically prior, to anything physical, then I'm an idealist. However, if I say that the physical is prior and the mentation or the consciousness is what's called, what's the word I'm looking for here? Oh fuck, don't fuck with me. Emergent property of this physical world, well then those are two totally different worldviews. The two heavens. One outside looking in, one inside looking out. All right. Fuck, I wasted enough of your time. 25 minutes. A Buddhist exegesis of Genesis chapter 1.